Welcome to Sunshine Art and Drawing. Today I'm going to be doing 6 abstract paintings. Now I've set up a camera and I've brought out a bunch of paints. I've got myself some water and I've also got some tape. These are all my acrylic paints that I no longer use. They're all getting dried up inside the tubes, so I thought I would try and use a lot of it up. This box here in particular are all the really dry ones. A lot of them I got from thrift stores and things like that. I do like to collect kind of vintage and secondhand art supplies, but sometimes they're not the best, but that's sort of the risk that you get with getting things secondhand. So what I've done here is I've brought out a bunch of paper. I'm making a palette just out of a spare sheet of paper and pouring out my paints to start. So here in the first part I'm going to be using my metallic paints. I didn't end up using all of those because for some reason they seem to still be pretty liquidy. Except for the silver. The silver was kind of nearly empty. But I thought I would start with these ones here, do an artwork, and then just see what I felt like doing. So I've got this big paintbrush here. It's one of those like regular hardware type paintbrushes, and I'm going to do a bit of a background to start with. The couple of rules that I gave myself for this, because it's not a challenge for you but more of a challenge for me. I have a thing where I like to make art that's aesthetically pleasing. I like to make art that uses pretty colours. I like to make art that looks really pretty. And the rule that I gave myself is I'm not going to care about that in this part. I'm going to make art just using my feelings, my soul, and just working on it that way. And try not to overwork the paintings. Try to kind of like just end the painting and put it to the side and start another one. That's why I brought out so many sheets. So here's the first one. I thought I would do a border of black and grey and white. And then what I did was I took my paintbrush, I neatened up the edges, and then I took some of the beautiful sort of silvery gold and bronze colours and I made a sort of starburst sun in the centre with the gold, and then I took more gold and I swirled it out so it made kind of like this beautiful sun image. I thought that one was really pretty. On to the next one. So this one I thought I would play around with trying to do some sort of abstract shapes. In the end I kind of went with a bit of a cashew nut kind of popping out of its shell. This one here, it just turned out really pretty. I kind of like the sort of bronzy colours in it and the golden cashew nut. And here as well I'm going to be doing one with more colours. So the good thing about having a cardboard palette is if you want to put a bit to the side and try some other colours, you can just tear off the part that you've used. Here I was just messing around with the palette knife. I don't use a palette knife very much, it's not very helpful in watercolour, but I thought I would give it a try, see what I can do using just this little palette knife that I've got, and spreading out the paint as sort of letting it go really thin and sort of choppy, and seeing what that looks like. And then I kind of didn't like that, so I took water and I spread it all out until I got a background, and that turned out really weird looking because all the paints mixed together make brown. And on top of that I decided to just keep adding other colours, making little sort of sunbursts and starbursts and swirls, and I figured that's not enough, let's try and draw with a tube of paint. So I grabbed a couple of tubes of paint and was trying to like draw some swirls. I think the swirls turned out really cool. Like, drawing with a paint tube, I never thought that that would be something I would find pretty easy, but I think the easiest part of this was to draw an artwork just using the tube of paint. So I thought, okay, let's do that. So I pulled out all of these old paint tubes, the ones I don't care about, so if they get messy it doesn't matter, but painting with a tube of paint, maybe give that a try. It turned out actually quite nice. And it was only when I started to try and use paints that were completely dried up that it sort of messed up my artwork. It was really difficult to use a paint that is completely dried out. It would just sort of stick in one spot and not spread. Like when it's quite liquidy, you can kind of squeeze the tube as you're moving along and it'll make kind of a nice artwork. But this sort of dark green brown colour and the white that was in that tube was pretty much just the thick paste and it was impossible to move. I ended up just using the back of the tube to try and move the paint around a little bit so that at least it spread out and it wasn't just a thick clump. The red paint here had all sort of separated, so when I tried to paint with it, it kind of all went clumpy. That's what you get for having like secondhand paints. Some of them are just a bit broken. that could be why they got donated. Someone went, well, I don't need all these, and donated them off. So I'm just going to keep going with my little flowers and things like that. I tried to make it a little bit kind of like a Bob Ross type painting, you know, with a bit of a sort of foreground and a background. Didn't turn out so well, but that's the whole point. It was an experiment. I wanted to see what you could do just painting with the tubes of paint. So once that dried a little bit, I peeled that one off and I started another one. So here, with this one here, I decided I would just drop paint directly onto the canvas and then try and mix it all together. I liked recording this because you get to kind of see the middle points of the painting, the part where I should have told myself to stop, which I will tell you that point in this painting here. So as I'm going here, I'm swirling all the colours together. And once I got this all swirled together and I spent some time kind of mixing them all up, I think probably on this artwork I should have stopped at that point. So as you can see, it kind of gets really nice, and at this point here, if I had stopped, it would have been a cool artwork. But for some reason my brain said, no, it's not good enough, and started to paint over everything. I found that my brushes were picking up way too much paint. There was probably way too much paint on the canvas. I did a bit of a splatter thing. It didn't really turn out right. So I scraped a lot of the paint off and mixed it all together, and it made this kind of like a pinky brown colour. I kind of like this colour. I don't know why. It's just this weird pinky brown. So once I'd done that, I had a layer of what was essentially wet paint. So I thought I would try and do a bit of a swirl. If you've got wet paint and you put more wet paint over the top, it kind of swirls together and mixes. So that's what I did here, using a few different tubes. I made a bit of a swirly artwork. Kind of reminds me of like Under the Sea or something like that. And the very last one I did, I was just using my fingers because most of my brushes were dirty at this point and I didn't want to mix the colours together. So I used my fingers to make kind of this swirly artwork. I used black, white, and the 4 sort of goldy bronze colours. So this is the end. I'm showing you my artworks that are finished. So I ended up with 6 artworks. So we have 5 down here on the floor, and then up above me on the top of my clothesline, which I'll just show you now, is the last one. This is the one that had all the really, really thick paint. So that's why I put it up here, because I was worried if I turned around and stepped right in it, I would track paint all through my house. So I popped it up there so that you could get a lot of sun and air. It wasn't very sunny that day, but hopefully it dry. And actually all the artworks did dry really well. I brought them all inside now. I did this on the weekend and it's Wednesday now. So they actually turned out really well. And I think my favourite one is the kind of goldy swirly one. I don't know why, it just turned out really pretty. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Have the sunshine.